And this is Now, and I'm looking forward to this next interview. It's called Climate Matters. My guest, Kyle Santos, chairperson of the Trinidad and Tobago, the committee of the Business Committee of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, thank you.
And Kishan Kumar Singh, head of the Multilateral Environmental Agreements Unit. Thank you very much for coming on the program this morning. And why I'm excited and looking forward, because I was reading through the notes and I see that we're going to be talking about our Trinidad and Tobago's obligations under the Paris Convention, the Paris Agreement that took place about 4 years ago now. And I do remember that particularly because one of my daughter's friends, who is from the Marshall Islands, was called upon to represent the Marshall Islands at this convention, because I believe that at the time, the lobbying was for that the world controls the increase in temperature to no more than 2 degrees, right? And then the Marshall Islands are saying if it goes to 2 degrees, they'll be underwater. And they were asking for it to go to 1.5 degrees so that they could, and I was astounded by that information. So Kishan Kumar Singh, we're going to start with you as head of the Multilateral Environment Agreements Unit. What is Trinidad and Tobago's obligations under this Paris Agreement that came out of that convention?
Right. Well, under the Paris Agreement, all countries have an obligation to contribute to this overall goal that you mentioned of keeping global temperatures to 2 degrees with an effort to keep it to 1.5, in fact, as an effort championed by the Marshall Islands. And Trinidad and Tobago has contributed to that effort by pledging to the UN that we will reduce our carbon emissions, our greenhouse gas emissions, our cumulative greenhouse gas emissions in 3 main sectors: the industrial sector, power generation, and transportation, by 15% by 2030 relative to a business as usual baseline. That accounts for about 103,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent from these 3 sectors.
And how are we progressing? Because I know our carbon footprint, Trinidad and Tobago, was not very good. We were somewhere up there, probably second, I believe, per capita.
Yes, well, we've per capita, because of the small population, our per capita index for anything would probably be very high. So on absolute basis, we are very small. We're less than 1% of global emissions. But it's not a very flattering metric at the same time. We are progressing quite nicely. In fact, the estimated cost of this is $2 billion US, which will be contingent on a mixture of domestic and international financing. But part of that commitment is also domestic funding through the fuel switching of the CNGC program, which has already realized a displacement of about 30,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide. But let me be quick to add that CNG is not the answer to sustainable transportation. We want to get to a point where we can power electric vehicles, for example, by renewable energy, so that it's absolutely emissions free, because this is where the world is going. This is where the world needs to go, and to avoid climate change in a catastrophic way, and particularly for small island states, because climate change poses an existential threat to small island states. Some of the islands have disappeared already in the Marshall Islands, for example, Solomon Islands, some in the Maldives. And inundation poses serious economic and security threats to small island states, because it can disrupt societies in a very major way.
And we've already started seeing some of that happening, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but of course in the Far East countries as well.
We are seeing it everywhere in the world, and closer to home, we are seeing this harsh dry season, which will be the new norm based on the climate models. And we can see some of the unease that is already happening because of water rationing. So this is something that we have to contain and manage in a very sensible way.
All right, so this is an excellent conversation. But before we bring you in, Kyle, I want to take in a few messages. We come back, talk about the Venezuela situation, which is actually breaking news right now. So we'll be back after this. And we continue now with our interview with regard to climate matters, climate change. And my guest this morning, Kyle Santos, chairperson of the Responsible Business Committee of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, as well as Kishan Kumar Singh, head of the Multilateral Environment Agreements Unit. And before we took the break, we were talking about all the issues with regard to Trinidad and Tobago's progress towards the Paris Agreement and some of the goals there. But I want to toss now to Kyle and to ask you, what does this mean for business? And I believe you guys are having an event around the whole idea of climate change and climate matters.
Absolutely correct. So next Tuesday, 4th of June, the day before World Environment Day, at 8:30 a.m. at the Trinidad Chamber of Commerce's building in West Moorings. Yeah. We are having an event called Climate Matters, and that is to explore exactly this question of what does climate change mean for business in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider region. Kishan touched on some of the challenges and risks posed, because there are risks and opportunities for business when it comes to climate change. And it's something that most companies in Trinidad and Tobago have not really dug their teeth into as yet. So the event is hoping to really do that. For an example, any company that is partially relies on exports in the region, they can expect to see perhaps more and more intense hurricanes as time goes on. Yeah. That could mean that you have some of your markets that might be out of action for months at a time, or some of your customers completely wiped out. Yeah. And I've seen that happen with clients that I've worked with.
So you're looking at the possibilities in terms of business with regard to climate change affecting business. What about looking at companies themselves becoming compliant with rules with regard to environment?
Well, Kishan can talk a bit more in terms of the rules, but right now there really aren't to my understanding, there aren't that many rules and regulations that companies need to follow. There are lots of voluntary things they can do. And one of the things that was going to be talked about is Mr. Kenneth Kerr, a climatologist from the Met Office, is going to talk about some of the tools and services that the Met Office offers to companies in terms of how they can think about weather and climate in relation to their business.
Because I think it's both sides of the coin, where the companies would explore what would happen to my business should a hurricane happen and an entire island's business just wiped out. But also, what do I do to contribute to global warming, and how can I reverse that? Correct?
Right. Yes, of course. And to touch on the question that you asked, to address climate change, there's only one way to do it, and it's to reduce emissions and to get it to a point where we could constrain global temperature rise to a comfortable level, where ecosystems can adapt, where human existence can continue in the way we know it. But in the meantime, we also have to adapt to some of the changes that we will get, because past emissions take about 7 decades to be manifested in the atmosphere. So if the world were to shut down now and all these lights and all these emissions were to go down now, we're still committed to change in the future because of emissions of today and yesterday and in the past. So the primary way is to tackle these emissions. And based on the commitment that we have given to the UN under the Paris Agreement, the Ministry of Planning has recently launched what we call a knowledge management system and a monitoring, reporting and verification system for all entities, all emitting entities, including the private sector and business, to report on their emissions. Right. We are running this pilot in a voluntary way, so we've asked business and all entities to come on board to test it. It is being managed by the Environmental Management Authority. And so when we test the system and we debug it and we dot the I's and we cross the T's and we know that it's working in the way we want it to work, the next step would probably be to enshrine this in legislation so that businesses and private sector and all emitting sectors, including ministries and government entities, will now have a responsibility for mandatory reporting of emissions. That's one way of tracking it. Yes. And beyond that, of course, would be, I suspect, would be regulating the emissions.
Well, even without regulating, I know some companies already voluntarily have started to really check themselves. But tell us who should attend, where is it, and how they can participate and so on.
Yep, absolutely. So hopefully, as people would get from this discussion, really across businesses, across sectors, business can expect to be impacted. So I would like to say that almost any sector should be interested and attend. Within those businesses, we would love to see leadership, because these are the people that are going to be in a position to act on this information. Right. From a practical day-to-day standpoint, it's also probably going to be facilities managers, corporate responsibility managers, health, safety and environment managers, people that are most likely going to be affected by this day-to-day in their jobs. NGOs and interested individuals, absolutely important that they attend. The event is next Tuesday, 8:30 a.m. at the Chambers building in West Moorings.
How do you register?
You register. You can email events@chamber.org.tt. Right. Or you can call 637-6966, an extension 1252.
That's easy. That's 637-6966, extension 1252.
5252.
I'll do that again.
Email events@chamber.org.tt.
So it's 637-6966 or and ask for extension 1252. I don't think you have to ask these days. You just tap it in. Or you can email events@chamber.org.tt. All right. So I want to thank Kyle Santos, chairperson of the Responsible Business Committee, I like that name, of the Chamber of Commerce, Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, and Kishan Kumar Singh, head of the Multilateral Environmental Agreements Unit. Always a pleasure to have the Chamber on. I know you guys have been on a number of times on the program, and it's wonderful to have met you, Kishan Kumar Singh. All right.